Friday to everyone. Thanks for spending part of your day with us, whether this is your lunch hour or the back half of your day, whatever it is, we appreciate you carving out some time to be here. Let's go ahead and pull up the draft, if you would, Rob. We would encourage everybody, if you have not already, the draft that we're going to look through today is posted in the same place that you went to access this link to the session. So there is a link to this draft of the strategies and actions for the goals and guardrails. It might help you to have your own version up as we're going through it, or at least to know how to reference it after today's session. So we're going to spend some time on the front end walking through this current draft to give everybody a sense of what's here, how we're thinking about this, and how this is coming together. And then we're going to create some space for you to ask questions and get those answered. And then we're going to get some feedback from you. Ultimately, that's why we're here, is to understand from your perspective how to make this a stronger and better version so that our district is on its best path to achieve the goals and guardrails. So let's jump in. Next page, please. It's really important to start with a few things in mind. The first is everything that you're going to look at today in this draft is around student-focused governance. We're going to talk about the goals and guardrails, and we're going to reference those extensively, but all of what we're laying out is meant to help us achieve those goals and guardrails. The language on this page comes directly from the Board of Education website. There is a link at the bottom which you can click if you want to go read more about these, or even if you want to pull up the goals and guardrails specifically. I will tell you on the front end, as we've learned from these sessions along the way, that the design and organization of this draft may feel and look differently than what you've seen or experienced in other strategic plans. It is not designed to say, here is a strategy we're going to pursue, here's the goal for that strategy, and then a set of objectives. Instead, it's a bit flipped. The goals and guardrails have been defined first, and now we're asking, what are the strategies and actions that we need to pursue along the journey to those goals and guardrails? So we'll talk about that more as we go. Next page, please. This page, just super high level, captures how everything fits together strategically. The why for our organization is captured with the vision and mission. The board is going to do work with the community over the next couple of months to rethink or consider revision to the vision and mission. The what, as I mentioned, are defined by the goals and guardrails. The goals really capture the priorities for the organization. They provide super clear focus to what we're trying to achieve. The guardrails outline the values that we want to uphold in that pursuit. What we're really here today to talk about and get your feedback on is how we go about that pursuit through these strategies and actions. So let's look at how the plan is coming together on the next page. This started more than a year ago when the board and the community had to think about what it wanted the future of Cincinnati to look like and what we wanted for our students through the superintendent search. Superintendent Wright then comes on board and engages with a lot of internal and community stakeholders and releases the 100-day journey, which is how we got back to the basics this year with the ABCs, academics, behavior, and culture. That concept of the ABCs laid the foundation for what we're able to start thinking about and building on even more in the draft you're going to see today. As mentioned, and as will be mentioned many more times, the goals and guardrails really outline the destination that we are working for. That was approved by the board in December, which let us start work this spring around drafting these strategies and actions. We've had a work team that's come together over the past 2 months to engage in this work. We've done feedback sessions all throughout this week, and we'll have some other specific sessions next week with community partners where we're continuing to engage and listen to folks on how to make this stronger and better. And then this will ultimately result in a final strategic plan with that vision and mission at the end of this semester in early summer. Next page. I do want to call out that what you're seeing here today comes from the work of those work team members. That's been nearly 60 people both school-based, district-based, and community-based stakeholders that have spent a significant amount of their time after hours over the past 2 months create what we get to look at here now. They started that work really thinking about 4 big themes that stem from the goals and guardrails. Those are literacy, math, college career, workforce, and culture. As they dug into those areas, it really ultimately resulted in the strategies that we're going to share with you now. The next 2 pages do tell you and list out who has been involved in those work teams. And again, their work is not done. They have to help us take all the feedback we're going to get from you and decide how to make the revisions to this draft. But we really appreciate their contribution and certainly would not be here without them. So let's take a gander at the goals and guardrails. Most folks have seen or heard about these at this point, but if you haven't, we did want to pause and take a look at them, but also reiterate a few big points. The goals are all student outcome focused goals. That goes back to the student focused governance that we are working on. So you see things here like 3rd grade reading proficiency or Algebra 1 proficiency or on-time graduation. So these are very specific quantitative goals that we are trying to achieve. They are also SMART goals. If you click on that link I mentioned earlier, you can see the specific targets that we are working towards each year over the next 4 years through 2027. The guardrails, as the values, really lay out what we want to create in terms of environment and experience for our student. So this is where we focus on making sure the whole child is centered in our work, that we're being responsive and restorative in our practices. We're focused on community partnerships and other key values that we want to pursue and uphold. Remember, everything else that we're going to see from this point on is trying to articulate the pathway back to achieving those goals and guardrails. The next page will lay out 2 key concepts that we want everybody to keep in mind as we look at the draft strategies and actions. And the first is around a specific and intentional use of language, what we mean when we say educators in this draft. And we mean everybody. We all play a really key role in supporting the growth and development of our students. So educators here is, yes, the traditional teacher, principal, counselor or librarian. It's also the custodian and the bus driver and the food service worker and the community volunteer and mentor and tutor and on that list goes, because it will take all of us to do the work articulated in this draft to achieve those outcomes with and for our students. The second key concept we want to make sure folks keep in mind are these pillars at the bottom of the page. And as we think about these strategies and actions and ultimately engage in implementation around them, these pillars say and remind us that we will center and uplift the voices of our students in that process in our pursuit of rigorous and transparency around equity and equitable outcomes that will transcend every action that we have going on as a result of this effort. And we will be culturally responsive throughout the entire set of strategies and actions. Sometimes those are explicitly stated in some of the strategies and actions, and sometimes they are not. But the work teams have really reiterated through this that these are things that have to be present all of the time and in every action that we're pursuing. So let's take a look at the draft strategies. There are 5: support our students, equip our educators, connect our community, ignite innovation, and optimize operation. Each of these strategies has an associated theory of action, which sort of binds the thinking behind that strategy and articulates why it is chosen and sort of what it's meant to do. Let's take a few of them as an example. We'll do support our students first. What we're really trying to accomplish with this strategy is what's on the right of the page in the then statement. We want to make sure that students have what they need to be able to be in control of their future. We believe that if students have what they need, then we will be on the path back to those goals and guardrails. The way we go about ensuring students have what they need is what's in the if statement. it requires us as a district and community to deploy integrated evidence-based practices for them. And as we look at that strategy in more detail in a bit, you'll see what those evidence-based practices are through the actions. So with each of these strategies, we should be able to draw a line through the theory of action of that strategy directly back to those goals and guardrails. So if, as a district and community, we deploy integrated evidence-based practices, that results in students having what they need to be better positioned to be in control of their future, which in turn has us on the right path to those student outcome goals and upholding those guardrails. Another quick example here under Equip Our Educators, what this strategy is really focused on achieving is making sure educators have the knowledge, skills, and resources that they need to serve our students. And the way that we ensure that they have the knowledge, skills, and resources in that work is through building capacity. So a lot of those actions are going to be related to capacity building. That same structure flows through the other three strategies, and we'll look at all 5 of these in more detail now. So let's go to the first one, support our students. Each of these strategies in the pages are designed in the same way right now. Know this is draft, but each of them flow similarly. So at the top of the page, we're reminding ourselves this is the support our students strategy. We're also reminding ourselves what we're trying to achieve with this strategy, which is students having what they need to be in control of their future. About a quarter of the way down the page, we specifically state the strategy here, which is deploying integrated evidence-based practices for students. Then we provide more detail around the actions. These actions start to articulate and define what we will go do as a district and community. They really spell out the how is all of this going to happen and what is the work that we will see and be a part of through this process. The bottom of the page has leading indicators of success. Those are meant to indicate the path to the goals and guardrails, not duplicate the goals and the guardrails. So we're not repeating here, hey, we want to improve 3rd grade reading, or hey, we want to improve on-time graduation. What we're doing with these proposed leading indicators of success is saying, are we seeing evidence that the actions we are pursuing is working out in the way that we intended? So that from a progress monitoring perspective, we can believe that we still are on the right path and we will see the outcomes that we want and need to see in the goals and the guardrails. Let's look at a few actions here as an example. Let's take action 1.2, evidence-based framework. So remember, the strategy here is to deploy evidence-based practices. One of those is an evidence-based framework called multi-tier systems of support. This is something that many districts across the country are pursuing or have in place. It's also something that the Ohio State Legislature is requiring of Ohio school districts by 2025. And it is a big way that we can ensure that students are getting the academic supports that they need, as well as the social, emotional, behavior, or other supports needed to stay on the path to success. So in this action, we will go develop and implement in every campus, in every classroom, a strong MTSS system that can help answer the question, are students where they need to be on the path to grade level success? And if not, what resources, supports, or services are needed to get them back there? And that applies to any student. It doesn't matter whether it's a student with disabilities or a student who's gifted or talented or a general education student. This really takes into account the entirety of their needs for each of their journeys. Another thing to call out here is action 1.3 around health and well-being. Throughout this draft, mental health is a huge part of what we are working towards. So as we think about health and well-being of students, this comes back in the Equip Our Educators strategies as well. It includes access to physical and mental health resources. The other one I want to call out here is the last one, action 1.6 around restorative practices. This may be a new term for folks, and it is something that the district has started to pursue, and we want to do a lot more work around. Because it really ensures that we are taking a more trauma-informed and restorative approach to supporting our students through the choices and development that they are undergoing. And so this both is student-facing and is educator facing. It's also a good example of something that we want folks to keep in mind, that all of these strategies have interconnections and overlap. So despite the fact that we're going to look at these sort of page by page separately and individually, it doesn't mean that they exist in isolation or in silos. There is a thread and a web that connects all of them. And so restorative practices, for an example, is something that is on the Support Our Students strategy, but you will see that come up in the Equip Our Educators and Connect Our Community strategy as well. So as we move on, remember the leading indicators tell us if those actions are being implemented and playing out in the way that we need to be on the path to the goals and guardrails. Let's look at the next one, Equip Our Educators. In Equip Our Educators, remember we are working to ensure educators have the knowledge, skills, and resources they need to meet the needs of our students, and that's really focused on a strategy around capacity building. And we will pursue capacity building through these specific actions. So we have an action 2.1 around content. How do we make sure everybody, again, regardless of the type of educator they are, whether they're in the classroom, in the school, in the central office, or potentially even in the community, they're getting the training and support they need to know how to do their role. We also have an action around cultural competence 2.2 that transcends every educator as well. Being able to recognize and understand one's own values and beliefs, those of others, how that might differ and relate to one another, and really being able to respect cultural differences and make sure that we are leveraging those to the maximum extent possible in our work with each other and in our work with students. Actions 2.3 and 2.4 are pretty classroom focused around curriculum and foundational skills. These are very academic oriented actions as well. And with foundational skills, it's really responsive to the learning needs and learning loss that we have seen, especially since COVID. And that's making sure that every educator that supports students, regardless of whether it's pre-K or all the way through high school, is really grounded in the science of reading and in foundational math, so that we can provide the scaffolds and supports to our students to get them on grade level pathways if they are currently not there. And as I mentioned on the student strategy, we see well-being come back up here, really thinking about access to both physical and mental health care for our educators and adults in a similar way as we are for our students. Again, multiple leading indicators are proposed here. Some of those will relate to a specific action, some relate to multiple actions, but help us gauge throughout the year and over this journey of the next 4 years if the work is playing out the way we thought it would. So we're not just dependent upon waiting to see if we achieve the goals and guardrails, but we can indicate if we are on the right path along the way. Let's look at the third one, connect our community. This strategy is really about partners being able to provide the resources, people, and opportunities that our students need to thrive. And the way we pursue that strategy is by creating and sustaining pathways for everybody to be present in the lives of our students. Certainly, as we think about community that is expansive, our first action here is around broad community engagement. You will see in community engagement, family engagement, and the work around LSDMCs, you've got things coming back in that were on the student and educator strategies. So this contemplates how we can provide similar training resources or ongoing learning to communities, families, and LSDMCs around things we're trying to do in schools and classrooms, like restorative practices or trauma-informed practices or SEL or even some academic efforts, so that we can think it doesn't matter whether a student is at a school, if they're at a church, if they're at a neighborhood center or any other place, that we are having consistent and shared approaches to how we are supporting those students' learning and development. A couple of other specific things we're trying to do here. Let's look at family engagement, making sure every school has an active PTA or PTO, so there's a more formal pathway for families to be involved. But we're also thinking about two-generational approaches. What other adult education supports or services can we either directly provide or in partnership with community providers make more available to families who want to engage in and pursue that? With post-secondary partnerships, let's jump down and talk about action 3.4. That connects back to community engagement, but is specifically about how do we get opportunities, more opportunities for high school students to experience what life may look like after their time in CPS. So building out more pathways to paid and unpaid internships and externships and volunteer opportunities across the city for our students as we think about both college and career pathways. Leading indicators of success, again here, span those actions, sometimes directly relate to one of the actions. So one of the things that we have heard about, and that could be an indicator of success, is creating a community roundtable, for example, who can help execute these actions and inform them along the way. Let's look at the next strategy, Ignite Innovation. This strategy really thinks beyond just the CPS work, but really about the entire city and community as a whole, to try to get to a place where we all can say that we're providing the best services for students. The strategy here requires us to then collectively reimagine our work and initiate new ideas as needed on behalf of students and families. 4 specific actions being proposed. The first is under discussion and deliberation by the board. The ad hoc committee is having a lot of conversation around enrollment in school zones and other things. So that's a bit of a placeholder depending upon where they land, but that's under conversation. High school transformation is something that we have begun this year and will continue in earnest. That looks at more access to specific opportunities like early college or career pathways, which you can see also connects back to the Connect Our Community strategy, as well as a deeper focus on improving on-time graduation and attendance in our schools. We also contemplate here the idea of how we bolster 7th and 8th grade programming in the district. Newcomer services, the thing to call out here is what we mean by newcomer students and families. Those are typically students who have been in the United States for 3 years or less, and most often are coming without prior formal education. So some of these students, it may be the first time they've ever been in school, or for others, it's the first time in a long time. So there are supports and transition services that students need as well as families. So this action is really trying to be as responsive to that as possible, certainly as we see this population increasing in the district. Program equity has been talked about with the board. There was a program equity audit provided to the board back in January. And here we're thinking about access and outcomes for students and for all students. We want to make sure that we're providing strong pathways, whether you're a student with disabilities, a student experiencing homelessness, a student who's gifted and talented, or any other student, that we have really clear and equitable access to outcomes across the district. Again, proposing leading indicators of success here, which span these actions and will help us gauge whether the actions are playing out as we hope and need them to. So let's look at our last strategy, optimize operations. This one is really about everything else we talked about. It is meant to enable success in all the other strategies. And the way we want to pursue that is by developing effective, responsive ways of working across the district. 2 areas are called out specifically here, HR talent and transportation. Both of those have been a topic of much conversation. And these actions are really around ensuring those teams and those those departments have the systems and processes in place that they need, along with access to actionable information that can guide continuous improvement and really strong quality supports to the stakeholders that they serve. Transportation conversation is ongoing. Another update will be discussed with the board next week, so folks should continue to pay attention to that. The Resource Equity Action 5.2 is really working to ensure that people get what they need to carry out this work and to achieve those goals and guardrails. It includes a specific action here around an equity index, which the district has been working on for some time. So we want to finalize that and be able to use it to guide decisions and allocations moving forward in the life of this ultimate plan. And then sustainable systems is really building on work CPS has been engaged in for quite some time, but making sure that we can continue to get better and that we can continue to get better at getting better, to steal something from my colleague and friend Aaron, who says that all the time. So this really transcends departments and schools and is a way that we can ensure that we are responding to the data that we're seeing through these leading indicators. We're responding to what we see each year in the data around the goals and guardrails, and we are making the improvements along the way so that by 2027 we can all say, yes, we made it, we achieved that destination laid out by the board in the goals and guardrails. So let's take a moment now, and we want to get your gut reaction to what you just saw and heard. So Rob, if we could go to the next page, and then Aaron, if you could talk folks through how to respond to this quick pulse check in Thought Exchange.
Yep, thanks, Derek. So on your screen right now, you see a QR code. You also see a website, tejoin.com. You can use the QR code or go to the that website and use the access code 113-821-684. And once you get to Thought Exchange, we're going to ask you to respond to one question and share your overall reaction to the strategies and actions for our goals and guardrails. The exchange is confidential, but you will be able to see the thoughts that were shared by other participants. However, not your identity or theirs. You can also rate other thoughts, kind of like Facebook. 5 stars, strongly agree, 1 star, strongly disagree, and really read through some of those other thoughts to see what's sparking curiosity and make some connections.
Again, what we ultimately need from folks is your feedback. In this comprehensive survey, you can see the QR code, and there's a hyperlink here as well. Thank you, Rob, for putting those links in the chat. It allows you to go through each strategy and set of actions and provide direct feedback. So you can say, hey, this one should be deleted, or you should change the way this one is framed. When you tell us that, you actually get to tell us how you want us to change it as well. So you get the red pin, so to speak, to the plan, and can help us know more actionably what we can do to make this better and stronger. Similarly, for the leading indicators of success, you get to propose deletion or revision there and tell us how you would prioritize them. So if we want to trim down the list, we've got a way to know how to do that. So this really is the best way that we can capture your feedback. We're so glad you're here and got to at least see and hear about the draft, but we're very much in the place of where we're trying to make it better and stronger, and we need to hear from you to do that. So whether you do it right now or carve out some time between now and Monday to get the survey done, please do so, and please encourage others to pull up this draft and complete the survey as well.